Well, welcome to another episode of Digging Deeper. I don't know what episode we're on, but we are so glad you're tuning in with us today. 1 million. Episode 1 million. And we have Pastor Mariah Sherman across the table. She preached this past weekend at Rise City Church. And guess what she did? She shared with us 2 sports analogies. And I told her she wasn't allowed to Google this before we talked. So the first analogy was regarding whom?
Jesus, of course.
Of course.
Okay, so I made one reference to CrossFit. Shout out to CrossFit Indestructible. One reference to basketball and one to boxing.
Okay, yeah, you did. Did you watch the boxing match that you referenced?
No.
But you just heard it was boring?
I was at a party that night and everyone was talking about it, and I feel like I got all I needed to know.
I had friends telling me that they weren't about to waste their money to watch the match. I was like, it was free on Netflix.
Was it on Netflix?
Yeah.
I heard you really couldn't watch on Netflix. It was buffering.
Oh, it was buffering the whole time.
But Cody Ledbetter posted enough.
Yeah, you could track
repost. I'm like, I know what's going on.
Now, here's the question, though. So you referenced a basketball player. What was his name?
Steph Curry.
Now, can you tell, just for our audience, just for those who are unfamiliar with Steph Curry and who he is, can you tell us all like what basketball team he plays for?
I was thinking it could be interesting if we ask Siri and just see what Siri comes up with.
That would be interesting. Should you determine first? Like,
I mean, if I could,
Are you Googling it?
I'm just Googling any basketball team. Are the Knicks a basketball team?
They are a basketball team.
That one.
No.
Lakers.
Closer.
Golden State Warriors.
Yes.
Wait, is that
time's
it?
a charm.
No!
That's it. Yes.
I wasn't even sure they were a basketball team.
How did you know the name?
Because they did something once when I was at Buffalo Wild Wings.
I'm so sorry. This is why you've tuned in today to hear this incredible conversation.
This has been wonderful. I saw like a dude perfect with Steph Curry, and that's how I know.
Well,
and Caitlin Clark.
Your sports analogies yesterday were brilliant. They worked out really well for the sermon, as well as the message. I thought it was great. And let's transition over to talk about that. There it is.
I don't know if we can.
So you preached a message, finished out our series on worship, and you shared with us a story of the fact that you lip synced for
now everybody knows
for show choir.
I've heard so many comments on that.
Have
You're
you?
like, there's no way you did that. I'm like, I did.
Did your parents know you did that?
I don't know, but my dad watches every Digging Deeper.
So here it is.
Let me know, Dad. I actually pulled up, you can Google Bonita Vista Music Machine 2009, and you can watch our show choir videos online. And I was showing one to a friend last night at dinner after the message, and she's like, there's no way you're lip syncing that. I'm like, I am.
You're like, I am that good.
I'm that good.
But I thought it was a brilliant analogy to what we do. So is this idea, for those of you that didn't watch it or listen to the message, we did have some streaming difficulties.
Yes, all the Wi-Fi went down.
Yeah.
Apparently, right as I was giving you a hard time. That's what everyone said.
It was weird. I don't know what happened. I don't know. They said that there was a line cut to the building.
Exactly. As soon as you start to insult the new lead pastor, the stream goes down.
No, it was actually, my understanding, it was not full countywide, but regionally in the county where we're at, everybody's internet was down.
Yep.
So for those of you that were watching that got midway through the first service, we restreamed the second. You can watch the whole message online. It's on our YouTube. That's where it's at. But this analogy, though, it was great. It's this idea of do we do that with God when it comes to worship? And you shared that, your journey of full commitment, fully invested. It took some time. And so let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I remember Lee, because I had shared in the message that I started dating and then later still married to my husband, Lee, who, when we were first married for the first decade, was the full-time production manager at a church. So when we moved here to Rise City, Rise wasn't big enough to have a full-time production manager. So Lee went and got an entirely new career so I could take the job here at Rise.
Yeah.
Shout out to my man. But he still does production ministry all over the county. But he was just he loved worship. And I was so when is this over? Like I thought like one song intro and maybe like another song at the end was really fine for me.
Mm.
And I now it's my absolute favorite part.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, oh, I could just catch Bobby online later on the live stream. Like I want to be here to worship. Like
Yeah.
there's nowhere else I can gather with a body of believers like that I know me, and to just give it all away to Jesus together.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
And it's different too. Like, I don't know. Did you ask yesterday how many people are concert goers? I think you asked that.
Yes.
So I've been to
Not that many.
concerts and I've been to worship services, worship moments, worship on Sundays, worship nights. And though they are similar in the sense that there's live musicians at both, live singers at both, it's musical. They are also vastly different because, if you go to
Less
a concert,
drinking.
well, sometimes, no, if you go to a concert, yeah, everybody might be singing the same songs, but they're there to see the band, and whoever that may be. But when you come and you're in church together and you're worshiping God together, you're there singing the same songs, but as adoration to God. And so the purpose and the motivation creates an extra level of like, I don't know, togetherness in the room.
Yes.
And so it is definitely a different experience.
Yes, I'm jumping back to sports for a second.
Okay. Go.
Be okay.
Yes.
I went to my first Padres game 2 years ago.
I haven't been to one yet. So
Wow. It was actually my first baseball game or like sporting event as an adult.
Wow.
And I was super, super pregnant, had my little kid with me. We were in the nosebleeds. By the time I got up there, I'm like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done. Like, I'm never coming to another sporting event again. But by the end of it, it was just such this incredible feeling to be in the stadium with all these people that were all rooting for the Padres. Like, there was nothing even like spiritual about it, but there was just this like fun togetherness of just like being there together and experiencing it. And after that, I've really enjoyed watching the Padres like on television, and because I feel like I'm part of this bigger thing.
Once you experience it in person, it changes. So like to bring it back to like worship, it's I've listened to live worship albums before and thought they were bad.
Bad? Like they like were
bad.
pitchy?
No, bad. Just like, yeah, whatever. Then same people lead worship in a live setting, just like they did on the album. And all of a sudden now I love the album because I feel like there's some level of connection to it.
There's this connection to like not only the like body of Christian believers, but also of all time that comes.
Yeah, you talked about that, which I thought was brilliant. It's just that idea you referenced you love hymns.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Do you think about like the songs that we sing now that will be, 5 generations down the road, it'll be their hymns?
I don't know. But here's something I would love to do. And I feel like I may be the only person who would love this. But I would love to have an intergenerational worship night where we could select the songs ahead of time and like put them out on Spotify. Because I like in college got into hymns and I had to actually sit there and like look words up in the dictionary. Because I'm like, I don't feel like I can sing this. Like, it's not a prayer from my heart if I don't know what the word Ebenezer means. So I had to like look things up. And it became so meaningful to me. And then about 10 years ago, my dad gave me his favorite album from when he became a Christian in the 60s.
Yeah.
And it was the greatest hits of Keith Green.
Oh, wow.
Are you familiar with Keith Green?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
I'd never heard this music before. And now it's some of the most precious music to me. And when faith and life all feel so complicated, I put on a Keith Green album and I remember like how simple and beautiful it is as well.
Yeah.
So like there's so much I've gained from like the music of the 60s and 70s. I never would have had access to. But then there's also like the music from when I became a Christian. Like there's key songs that will always like, I'll always remember what God did in my life during that time. Like I would love to have a worship night that jumped the generations.
There was a let me pull the scripture up because there was a song that came to my mind, and I'm not a great singer.
You and I are going toe to toe on songs again. That didn't turn out well last time.
That didn't. But during in Revelation chapter 5, right?
Yeah, that's what we're in.
And so in Revelation chapter 5, verse 14, the end of it, it's bringing. Where's it at here? Sorry, I'm getting there. It is blessing and honor, glory and power belong to the one.
To you, the only wise king.
But there was this one that's like, it's like this old, like maybe late 90s. It's like blessing and honor, glory and power. You know that one?
No, I was
Oh
going
my
for
gosh.
Revelation song.
No, so mine's further back from Revelation song.
You're
But like
really
even
old.
yesterday while you were preaching, I thought, sorry for all of you who just had to hear me sing. I just thought about that. But even as you were preaching, that song was in my head and in my heart, which makes me think about just that idea of like when we worship, and it's what you're saying, it connects something, and it actually can be something in our future that centers us, grounds us, reminds us of God's faithfulness. That's the beauty of song, is that we can go back and we can sing it again, and we can remember the moment. We can remember what God has done, what God is doing. There's powerful thought in that. But we're veering off the question I wanted to ask, oddly enough. So in the idea though of lip singing, what do you think? It's easy to go, oh well, I don't lip sing in worship because I sing the words in the service, and whereas, sure, could that be part of what you're talking about? I guess. But I think it probably goes deeper than that. What does it look like for modern day follower of Christ to lip sing worship?
I think that we like to think that when we come into church, we're like shedding all these fleshly things and coming to Jesus. But a lot of times we take us with us everywhere we go.
Mm-hmm.
And so you put me in a room with a bunch of Christians, and I know we all believe in Jesus, and the worship music starts. I'm still thinking to myself, what's normal for this church? Are people raising their hands? Are they not raising their hands? I don't want to raise my hands and look weird. Are people singing loud? Or are they singing quietly? And I want to just fully let go and worship Jesus, but I find myself caught sometimes in like still so stuck in my own self-image and not being able to shed that and just fully worship.
Yeah.
I think that is maybe a more literal idea of lip syncing.
You referenced the reason why I really like loud music. Like I like
at church,
the speakers, like the audio coming at me to be loud. It's more because I'm not a great singer, and if I don't have to hear myself sing, I feel better. I also always try to sing an octave higher of whoever's singing. So if Kayla's singing at the high notes that she was
you're
yesterday,
going to sing an octave higher than Kayla?
That's what I'm going for.
Higher or
That's
lower?
No, higher. I'm going higher. Higher's more. I can't hit anything. I'm so far off. It's not even funny. But in my head, that's where I think I'm supposed to go. So I have to like tell myself, sing lower. Use the lower tone. I'm like trying to, I can't sing. The point is though, I like loud music, so I don't have to hear myself.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so when people go to churches, they're like, "Oh, I really like the audio to be low." I'm like, "Oh gosh, I sound so bad. I prefer it to be."
Well, I went to a church once, a friend's church that was a more traditional Baptist church, and I had never experienced this before. It was worship time, and they said everyone stand and open the hymnal to page 179, and everyone opened these books under their church. There was lyrics under the seats, and one guy got up on a piano and played the piano, and everyone sang out loud.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing to it.
Yeah.
But you were singing. Like everyone could hear you. If you didn't know the melody, it was like, ooh. But there was also something
There's a beauty to that.
Beautiful I'd never experienced before.
I love when we're in moments of worship, like on a Sunday, and all the instruments cut out and just vocals. And oftentimes I love it, even when like those on platform stop singing and the whole room is in unison singing. I sing in those moments as well, just a little quieter,
just in case.
But I do think that like lip singing when it comes to our worship, it's looking like we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, but we're putting on a facade. And the reason why is typically, probably I would guess, you described it, it's protection of self-image, protection of self-motives, ideas. What's our motivation for doing it? I love that you were like super clear about it. You didn't preach about this, but you're like, I signed up for this because I wanted the benefits of going to another nation, which I wish I would have thought about that.
I've got some great photos if you want to see from Austria.
That's fantastic. But like
the Swips Alps were
But
beautiful.
how often do we play the part, look like everything's right, only because we want to receive the benefits, but truly we're not truly in it. We're not truly committed. We're 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I think part of the times when we like that idea of lip singing, it's because we live. It's really nice to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because when you want to receive the benefits of being in, you just sort of lift up your out foot. And when you want to receive the benefits, quote unquote benefits of being out, you just lift up your in foot. And you can like teeter-totter that line for a long time. And ultimately, if you're lip singing worship, it just means you're not worshiping.
Yeah, because the one that you're actually worshiping to is not fooled.
Yeah. Yeah, for Christ to receive our worship, it's got to be worship, and which means it has to do something to the inside.
Yeah, which is why the whole thrust of the message was that worship starts inside.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter how many sermons we get about how great worship is and all these different things. If you don't think that God is worthy of your worship, then lip syncing is all you got.
All you got. Yeah. Which is cool, because you see that in the themes of Revelation, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. And then you use that idea of worthy, and you talked about the woman at the well, which I love that story. I want to preach that story eventually, but now I'll have to wait and do it some other time.
No, let's do it like back to back. Like who wore it best.
It was fantastic. I'm not preaching anytime soon, but you use this idea to talk about this pretty significant moment in Scripture where Jesus encounters a Samaritan. I love the history and background you gave, by the way, that context of why she walked out when she did, what she was doing, the weight of carrying the water, all those details. But it all boiled down to this moment where the woman and Jesus are talking about worship. Isn't it interesting that the woman is the one who's like, it's like, well, what you Jews say it matters where we worship. Like she's the one who brings it up.
She had one chance to try to pull out some theological something to trip this guy up, and she picks worship. I'm like, whoa.
And even in her approach, she's asking a question like, is it here or is it there? And the place, Jesus is like, it's me. And then he goes into the whole idea. But I wrote down a question. We briefly chatted for a second about it. But it was this idea of when she got mad at Jesus, and she's like, well, are you saying you're better than our ancestors? The only thing I could think of was the fact that, like, had she prepared her rebuke of the Jewish man before she ever met the Jewish man, if I ever run into a Jewish man, this is what I will say. Like, I wonder if it was like she was playing out a scenario that she had created in her mind. And I don't know, maybe she didn't, maybe she did.
The wrong Jewish man.
The wrong Jewish.
To bring that one up to.
Or the right, because every other Jewish man would have said, no, you are this, and this is why we don't come here, and the interaction. But she asked these questions that drive home to this idea of worship. True worshipers will worship in spirit and truth, and he reframes it. And I think the beauty of her act of worship, because her act of worship wasn't song.
Right.
Though she was singing his praises when she got back to town. But it wasn't like, she didn't stop there and start singing Amazing Grace. That'd be weird. It wasn't written yet.
It would have been so miraculous.
She didn't start singing Psalm 93.
There you go.
There we go. But by the way, just for those of you Google searching this right now, I don't know what Psalms 93 is off the top of my head. I just chose that
she
random.
Probably couldn't read. So we're all good on this analogy.
Here we go. But she went back to the town, and all she began to do is come meet the man that's told me everything I've ever done. Ever done.
I love her.
But for her, I imagine it felt like that.
At that point in her life, her identity was probably wrapped up in those 5 men.
And she said, I perceive you are a prophet.
I know. Just loved.
Do you now?
She everything he says that could have been life-changing for her, she just rolls it right off her back. Like she'd had men tell her a million times how she should be living her life differently.
Mm-hmm.
And she was unfazed.
When Jesus said, "Go get your husband," and she's like, "I'm not married."
I know.
You know, it was like, yeah, you thought you were good. Go get my husband. I don't need a man. I don't know.
And then he's like, "You're right. You've had." He was like, "Oh,
You've had 5 and you're living with a dude right now. He's not your husband."
yikes!"
Is that what you wanted to hear? I know what's going on. I'm trying to take you somewhere. I actually wonder if Jesus asked that question so that she could automatically go, "I'm not married." And so when he said, "I know you're not married. You've had 5 husbands. Now you're living with a man who's not your husband." I wonder if that was his way. You know, it's like signs, miracles, and wonders. Like, I wonder if that was his way of going, "Hey, look at me differently for a moment. I'm not an average man. I'm the Messiah." Like, and he could say those words that he says at the end, which you say are so good, that I am the Messiah. He could say those words, but for her in that moment, void of that moment, would she have heard them in the same way?
No way. Another way to look at it, like I think of, he was trying to open another door for her to walk through.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm going to press. It's kind of like when your kid has like frosting all over their face and you're like, "Hey, did you eat a cupcake?" And like, you know, they ate a cupcake, they know they ate that cupcake. And you're kind of like, I'm just going to go right to the problem and give you a chance to be like, "Yeah, I ate that cupcake."
Yeah.
And I feel guilty about it. He's kind of like, "Go get your husband." And it was an opportunity for her to be like, "I'm not that good of a, like, no." But she's just like, "I don't have one."
She could have bore her soul.
Yeah, she had that opportunity
Yeah.
to exactly, but she just sloughed it off again. So to the point where he had to be like, "No, I know you have frosting on your face. And I know how many cupcakes you've eaten.
Yeah.
And I'm still here talking to you. And I've known this information the entire time this conversation has gone on.
And it's that kind of stuff
I
that
still want you."
informed her worship. Her worship, again, very external. Her worship was very much go and tell the city. And the coolest thing is the fact that the whole city is transformed. And we don't talk about it much, and the scripture doesn't reference it a whole lot, but even that moment, what the disciples would have felt, like, you know, they would have skipped around. They wouldn't have walked through Samaria.
Oh,
yeah. They would have walked around. That would have been the tradition. But even them staying there, experiencing a new way with Christ, a new way in this interaction. Like, could you imagine what they thought when they came back and there's a woman at the well? You know,
If you just read like another 10 verses, he has this whole conversation with the disciples where they're like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "You don't understand yet." And they're like, "Yeah, we really don't understand." "Hey, do you want food?" He's like,
I have
"I
food
that
you don't know
about." And they're like,
who gave him food? That was their question.
"Did you give him?" This guy's nuts.
Is he hiding food in his satchel? Where's his food?
And then he's like, "The harvest is ripe.
Yeah.
And the workers are few."
And an entire city that had been neglected by those who are supposed to love God and serve God. An entire city is transformed.
And yes, I could just imagine the disciples being like, "Okay, well, I got you some food, so you want to eat?" And they're all just sitting and waiting. And then the first person comes from the city, and the second, and the third, and they just start coming and meeting Jesus. He ends up staying there for a few days to teach them and heal them. It's like, the disciples must have just been like,
one thing that always
thanks.
cracked me up about it. So they say the disciples would have been like teenagers, give or take, you know, for the most part. Some of them might be a little bit older, early 20s, but Jesus would have been 30, 31. He wasn't old and decrepit. Like he was a man. They walked a lot. He walked the same distance as these young guys, the disciples. And they get to the well and he's like, "I'm hungry." And he sends all 12 of them away, which is sort of funny because I know well enough to know I got 3 kids. If I needed something done and sent all 3 of them, the first thing I get is an argument. All 3 of us don't have to. One man needs food. Let's just send a couple people. But he sends them all away, which again, to me, when I'm reading the scripture, I'm asking questions. Did he send them away because he knew the woman was coming?
Yep.
He met her at that well. She didn't know that she had an appointment with Jesus, but Jesus knew he had an appointment with her. And if the men were there, if all 12 of them were there, would it have been intimidating and she would have walked away and never had the encounter? If she would have walked up and saw them, like, would it have changed her tone, their tone? Would they have interjected when Jesus was talking and messed up I believe when I look at that, I believe it was Jesus orchestrated the moment. He sent the 12 away, go get food. and he set up a moment for this woman to have an encounter with himself.
And there's something to be said about like being in a room of people that are like-minded.
Mm-hmm.
Like just the presence of the disciples at that time that would have been giving sideline looks changes the atmosphere.
And she was sassy. I mean, that woman had some sass. And
she was smart too.
And I could imagine that most sassy people are. They
right?
have enough knowledge.
You have a lot of brains behind you.
But this woman could have like responded back to even the look. So I believe he set the moment up.
Me too.
Which is something to consider. Like there might be people listening to this podcast, and there's probably only a few if there are, but that don't follow Christ currently. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're far away from him. And hindsight's 20/20, but sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you miss the forest for the trees, yep. Sort of thing. But I believe that God has ways of orchestrating and orienting our life to be able to have moments where we see him and we understand him. And I guess the question that we have to answer is, how do we respond in those moments? Mm-hmm. Like I look back at my life. You told part of, like your story. Like I look at the moments of my life and it's like, it doesn't compute. Being here today doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The fact that I stayed away from certain things as a teenager makes no sense to me. And I know if I'd have went down that road, my life would have went in a different course because I would have never had that encounter with Christ. I remember going to like this old school church play called Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
It's like an old. Have you really not?
No.
Wow.
Is this one of those like mime things that you did in college?
No, I didn't do mime things. Thank you very much, Mariah. No, it was like a human video of sorts, like a drama. It was a play.
Aren't videos with humans human videos?
Yeah, there's a different sort of terminology here in that world. Human videos,
I'll Google it.
Are like people become the water or the fire. And then, it's a whole thing. Wow. Fine arts. But then there's like drama, like where you do like live acting or lip singing to songs sometimes too.
It's perfect for me.
Perfect. It's perfect for you. It's like show choir with slightly less dancing.
Okay.
But Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames, I remember the local church, the one where I started going to church where I gave my life to Christ, they would do a Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames production. And again, it was a model of the late 90s. It's almost scare tactic kind of approach. It's like the people who did right things go to the pearly gates because everyone dies in it. And the people who did bad things, they get cast into hell. I got to play a part in it after I gave my life to Christ, and I got thrown into hell by the devil. And I got thrown back like that. Long story short, it's funny now. I would never do it again. But that moment served a purpose in my life because it was just I remember the first time we went because it was happening in town. I think my mom wanted to go see it or something like that. And I don't know, there was something in the room that, again, just little moments in my life that would pique curiosity. And I think there's things that when we can look back on our life after following Christ that we can see, I can see God there, I can see him there, and I can see him there. And when you can see God move in your life, long story short, then you can understand even more why we worship him. Yeah. This woman encountered, goes to the city, worships God. I've encountered God in my life, and I think about the goodness and the faithfulness of God, and it's like, how can I not worship? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Even through hard stuff and when I look back, I can't help but just notice that God always seems to show up.
Yep.
Yeah.
See, I didn't have Hell's Gates and what was it?
Heaven's Gates. You walk through Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames.
Flames. Okay, I didn't have
fire.
I didn't have the joy of that experience. But it's so interesting you say that because I actually gave my life to Jesus at like a crusade type event.
Okay.
It's local here in San Diego and it's really close to the hearts of a lot of people in this area. It's called Future Quest. And they had this closing speaker that would come that was just borderline outrageous. Like when I was a youth pastor taking my own students, we stopped going to attend his like things. Yet it was there that I gave my life to Jesus. Mm-hmm. And it was in a worship setting. And I think one of my big hangups for worship for a long time was that I had a really hard time integrating the intellectual part of myself with the human emotional part of myself.
Mm.
And so it was hard for me to experience worship. I experienced it as manipulative because when I had to integrate my mind and my heart, it was unpracticed for me. So it immediately felt wrong.
So how did you get over that hump?
Because I think as I matured as a person, realizing that we're more than just our intellect and logical arguments.
Mm-hmm.
And that at the end of the day, like I'm a Christian because I had a supernatural experience with a God that I can't ever unsee.
Yeah.
I can't ever undo. And it makes me feel like it would make me feel silly to say like, no, I don't tell you, but there's more than just my mind. And I was just very uncomfortable with the integration of both of those things.
Yeah.
Like feelings were silly and foolish, and intellect was respectable.
I've said this before to a few people. To divorce like feelings and emotion from worship is a weird endeavor. Let's just rephrase this. To divorce feelings and emotions from our relationship with God feels like a weird endeavor. Now, let me clarify, quick clarifying statement before I make the actual statement I want to make.
It's getting exciting.
We should not be led by our emotions.
Absolutely.
We should not be led by our emotions. That is poor decision making on your life. Our emotions lie. They lie to us constantly. We lie to ourselves through our own emotions more than you probably get lied to by yourself more than anybody else or everyone else combined.
Absolutely.
You know, look in the mirror. I think I'm ugly. I think I'm whatever. I think I'm this. I think people think about this, and your emotions can lie to you. So that's important to know. But
so can your intellect.
So can your. That is true, and it might even be. It's just as good at lying to you.
Yep.
But your emotions lie to you. But your emotions aren't bad. Like we have emotion. God gave us emotion, and when we say, like, when people want a relationship with God void of emotion, it doesn't make sense because a human being who is void of emotion is called a sociopath.
And very few of us are actually void of emotion.
Yeah, and no one actually thinks that's a positive thing. Like
you've just suppressed them real far down.
Yeah, no one thinks that's a good thing. To have zero emotion and empathy and anything toward, like, that's not a natural human instinct. And so to suppress all of that and act as though God only wants my mind.
Yes.
You know, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. It's your emotion and your being is part of it. And so I don't want to confuse it and say, well, we should just be a bunch of emotional basket case kind of people. No, I don't think that's accurate either. But I don't think God's looking for just dry, stale intellect worship only that has the lady, come meet the man who told me everything I've ever done.
The Bible's full of that stuff. It's full of like God creates tension all the time. Yeah. He's like, he's always pulling on both sides. Mm-hmm. And you're like, darn it, I can't just like binge this side or binge this side. Like we have to live in the tension. Yep. Like it's not all emotion. It's not all intellect. And living in that integrated part is what real humanity really means to be a human. Yeah. That's what Jesus showed us. Yeah. The intersection of intellect and emotion surrendered to God. Yeah. So it's real hard, bro.
Man. All right, let's do this. Let's jump into your last I wrote down on my notes that I was taking in service. Mariah thought
you were tweeting.
She thought I was checking out Facebook or something. I don't know. I was taking notes. The last 4 from the scripture in Revelation. One was, and this is how I wrote it down, and I just would love for you to expound on any of these because I know you quickly went through them. So if there's anything where you're like, hey, I would add this or I would say this and I didn't get a chance to. The first one, the way I wrote it down, is if you have no trust for God, you will not give him anything that matters to you.
So good.
Is that about
You said it better than I said it. I feel like I served up like steak and you like read it back to me as filet mignon. That's terrific.
Well, I thought that idea, that's the idea that I was getting from the conversation was that if you don't trust, then you don't give him anything. If you don't, we're in the middle of our Christmas offering and we're talking about it a lot, but how do you give God money if you don't trust God.
Yes.
And some people would go, well, I'm giving money to the church.
And I trust them. I just don't trust God.
The truth is, it's easy for us to misunderstand giving as a charitable donation to my local church. And whereas that sounds cool, and maybe on your taxes, that's what it's considered. But when we give to the church, we're giving to God, and the church is responsible for stewarding it. But how can you give to God if you don't trust God? So trusting God is obviously a huge element.
Yeah. And I don't really blame you. Like if you're like, no, I don't really trust God. I'm not giving to him.
Yeah.
I respect that. I'm like, you know what? That's authentic. I appreciate that.
Now let's teach you why, or maybe help you see why you can trust God.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the journey.
Because when you're actually in a place where you do trust God, it's like a key that clicks and the rest of it follows.
Yeah.
Like when I became a Christian, when I was a teenager, I started tithing.
Yeah.
And it didn't even I'm like, well, if God says that that's good for us and for me and for the church, I'm going to do it. Like, why would he lie to me?
Yeah.
Right. But there was that element of like trust.
That's the intellectual side of your brain that's like, hey, cool, I'm just going to go with this. I don't have to process this emotionally. God says to do it. I'm going to do it. Like,
Maybe a little hiding behind there. But that's why it took me so long to come to faith, because
Yeah.
I had so many intellectual pursuits I had to follow. And I'm really glad that I did. I would never recommend to someone to be like, don't trust your intellect, just follow your feelings and follow Jesus.
Well, Jesus,
that's the counting the cost that Jesus talks about.
Yeah, you don't start a building unless you know what you're about to have to give to it.
Yep.
You don't start a war unless you know you can win the thing.
That'd be great.
That was the two analogies Jesus gave with that same. So it's good to consider it, think about it.
Yeah.
And if you're truly pursuing Christ in it, then I think you'll see it. It'll become clear.
I think that I had said this during like the altar call moment, that if you don't know if you can trust God, I really want to challenge you to begin what that journey looks like, because it's so easy to be like, I'll get around to that someday.
Yeah.
And it's not even that, like, you might die and never give your life to Jesus. That's possible, but that's not the motivation. I'm not like, well, you need fire insurance, so believe in Jesus because you might die in a car crash. You could die in a car crash. But even every day that you live away from the purpose you were created for is so sad to me.
The Bible actually says that we were dead in our sin. So every day you live, but you're actually dead and you've never experienced life.
Can you believe that there's actually so much more than you've ever experienced or known?
And most people can't. Like, if you're not a follower of Christ, I can imagine that would be, life's not better, and it's all the things the church is a church of no, or I'm not allowed to do X, Y, or Z. And it's that idea. But no, to trust God and to pursue him. And the truth is, if you're pursuing God, the good news is he's pursuing you.
Thank goodness.
That's the good thing to know. It's like you didn't come up with this idea on your own. Your next thing is you talked about, again, this is just my interpretation of what you said. Choosing to go prostrate before the Lord is only done when you trust God. And you specified, and I wrote this down, it's a choice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a posture that you come by accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really vulnerable about the posture is that that's a similar posture you would take if you're going to be beheaded.
Yeah.
I mean, you're literally opening yourself up to an enemy.
It's the same posture you would take if you were bowing low before the king.
Yes. And that's why
submission.
That's why bowing low before the king is such an impactful posture, because he could literally it's such a vulnerable posture to take in front of anybody.
Yeah.
If you took that posture in front of an enemy, you'd be dead.
Yeah.
So you're actually saying, like, you are not my enemy, and I trust you with my life.
It'd be easy to say, well, okay, what's the word, the Greek word?
Proskuneo.
Proskuneo. So it'd be easy to go, well, what Mariah said was, I, during worship, am now supposed to go to my knees.
Awesome. Please do.
And that's great. I think physical response to scripture, I think it's great. But I think it's deeper than that. Yeah. So what does it look like to because again, worship. This series has not just been what it means to sing and worship God through song. It's about what it means to worship God with life. So what does it look like to be proskuneo? Did I say it right? Prostrate before the Lord in life.
I think I would suggest that you first figure out what you're prostrate in front of. That's not God.
Yeah.
Because when you come to worship him and you want to bow to him, there's really not a lot of room to bow if you're already bowing to 5 other things simultaneously.
And you sort of talked about this in your message. I don't know if you use these words or not, but often, I don't think you said it this way, but this is what you were saying, that oftentimes we bow down before things. It's easy for the human to be like, oh, you're talking about the bad things I bow down before. And like we have all the bad things that we bow down before. Anything above God is a bad thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing, but now that you've put it in that location,
Yeah.
it's going to be bad.
Yeah, and it's going to create false things. And so you talked about how we lay prostrate before our kids.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to think about that because when you're in that position, you probably think, no, you're just not
Like,
seeing
I would
it
do
right.
anything for my children.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard that,
And
like, I would die for my kids.
Uh-huh.
They're like, well, would you live for your kids?
Oh, yeah. That's
You're like
the-
one of
yeah,
those
yeah,
things, but
yeah.
it's like, you know.
Would you get healthy for your kids? Would you do this for your kids? Would you? But that's essentially what it's talking about. Is
There's an element
to
there.
be prostrate. There is to go. What am I? What does it mean to lay down my life prostrate before the Lord and putting Him above everything else?
I would actually visualize, like, if I could give a suggestion of like when you are worshiping, like you have your hands in the air. Maybe that's like the same sort of symbol for you. Envision the things that come up before Jesus in your life commonly and imagine yourself laying them down.
Yeah.
Like one by one.
That's a good spiritual discipline.
And like practice that when you worship and ask the Spirit to bring to mind things that you don't realize that you're actually bowing down to.
Yeah, that's great. So your third one was about worship isn't just about right now, but we're joining in with all of history and all of eternity. Like worship is not just for the moment; it is for all time.
So cool.
And so, I mean, I don't think we even have to say anything else about that unless you had something else you
No,
want
I
to
think
add.
we talked about it earlier with all the hymns and stuff.
Yeah.
So cool.
And then, the fourth one was the one I didn't get to write down because I was standing up and it was at the end of the moment when we went back into worship. But I thought it was great. I thought Sunday was great. I thought the worship series was fun.
It was. I think it was really well needed for Rise City.
Yeah.
I think it was something that God's been moving in our hearts, and to have it called out and taught on was just met us right where we were at.
Yeah. So it was fun times, and I'm sure it won't be the last time I talk about worship over the years, but the last time in that context for a little while. This month coming up, we're going to talk
bananas.
So much stuff happening. We have next week is the first Sunday, or this upcoming Sunday is the first Sunday in December. And so it's our last full Sunday before Christmas offering. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to live beyond ourselves, legacy, future on this upcoming Sunday. Excited to get into that. And then we're going to Christmas offering on the 8th.
Yes.
And just
the kids
so
have been
pumped.
so busy raising money, bringing in coins. They're bringing in quarters this week, then dollars.
Uh-huh.
And then the kids are having a little competition, boys versus girls. So if whichever one wins, boys or girls, they're going to get to pie Pastor Bobby at the Christmas movie night.
There it is. I forgot I agreed to that.
We
I
think
thought you were making it up.
you just have such nice hair, and I feel like it's
It is.
never messed up.
You know,
And they're going to pie you in the face and rub it all over your hair.
I'm excited for those children.
Absolutely. I can't wait.
I asked my kids, we were talking, and me and Megan were talking with them about Christmas offering, and we're like, hey, we're giving as a family, and do y'all have any thoughts to what we should give? I wanted to hear their interjection.
1
One of
million.
them said $1 billion. So
$1 billion.
$1 billion. I said, that must be a word
Do-
for someone else.
Do you need a salary increase?
But one of them actually made a comment, and we live in San Diego, so our rent and mortgages are expensive, especially if you just moved here in 2024. My goodness. But one of them knows how much our rent is, and he says, I think we should give this much because it's what we pay for rent for every month, and I think that would be a good number to give. And it stretched me because I'm like, I have some money set aside, but I don't have that much money set aside for it. But I actually thought to myself, I told Megan, I'm like, that actually might be a really cool aim for us as we look into 2025, because that's the way I think about this. I don't think about just a once offering in December. How can I plan towards this for the year? But yeah, if you're listening, you're part of Rise City, or if you're not and you want to participate, man, go to the Lord. talk to your spouse, talk to your kids if you want to and get some crazy answers.
Get some $1 billion situations.
But pray about it, plan, and make a decision to come faithfully with an offering to the Lord, that the church will steward well, and not just locally here in San Diego gets impacted, but all around the globe. So
and if you've got kids, I encourage you, have your kids work for whatever it is. It's beautiful to give as a family, but it's such a valuable time for your child to understand what it means to sacrificially give.
Yeah.
That they are going to go without something so someone else can go with.
Yeah.
So make them work for it, or maybe if there's a special treat you guys are used to doing, purposefully go without it.
And specify, we're going to not do this.
We're not going to McDonald's for our Friday
so
eat
that
out.
we can do this.
And when you go home and you're making sandwiches together for dinner, talk about the cool things that God might be able to do in the lives of people with that $30 you guys
I think it's cool too to let if your kids earn it, let them bring it and give it. Let them be a part of the moment in whatever way you can. There's lots of ways. And so, exciting stuff. If you're not registered for our Christmas Eve service yet, register for one. It's going to help us. And other than that, we have went 45 minutes. I think it is time to close it up.
Yep. Happy sports this Thursday.
Happy sports.
I bet you there's teams playing.
I'm sure there is. Go watch a soccer match this
49ers.
week. Nothing. Yeah, it's a football team. Yes. Nothing more American than a soccer match. Go watch one of those this week.
You've got problems.
I've got 90. No.
Oh, no!
All right. Have a great week and see you guys later.